My name is Clara Ashburn. I am 32 years old, a high school teacher in Charleston, and I thought family betrayal meant cold shoulders at Thanksgiving or quiet gossip behind my back. I never imagined it would begin with a wedding invitation that left me off the guest list. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. Then small cracks began to show. A credit report with debts I never signed. Late-night threats that reached my phone. And the sound of my own brakes giving out on a quiet road. I kept asking myself one question: how far would my own sister go to erase me? And when the answer finally came, it did not arrive in whispers or rumors. It arrived in a way no one in my family could escape. Stay with me, because this is the story of how humiliation turned into something far darker, and how I learned that silence can be broken in the most public way imaginable. But to understand how it all unfolded, you need to know how it began. I was teaching American literature when my sister's engagement news reached me. Chloe Ashburn was 28, beautiful in a polished kind of way, and had always known how to draw attention. For as long as I could remember, she and I had lived in a quiet but sharp competition. She won favors, charmed relatives at holidays, and always managed to get our mother's hand resting on her shoulder, while I was left proving myself in silence. That afternoon, I came home from work with a pile of essays to grade and found my mother at the kitchen table holding a glossy envelope. Her face was glowing with pride. She told me Chloe was marrying Julian Vance, the only son of the Vance family that owned one of the largest hotel groups in the Southeast. She spoke of it as if it were royalty, as if Chloe had secured not just a husband, but an entire empire. I felt a strange mix of surprise and resignation, but still, a part of me thought perhaps marriage would bring her down to earth. That night, I opened the envelope that had been set aside for me. Inside was the wedding invitation, cream-colored with gold lettering. I traced my eyes across the elegant script, reading the date, the venue, the names of prominent guests. I read it twice, then a third time. My name was not listed anywhere. I carried the card to my mother, who was rinsing dishes in the sink. I placed it on the counter in front of her. My voice trembled, though I tried to sound even. I asked if there had been a mistake, if perhaps my invitation had been mixed up. She glanced at the card, then at me, her eyes shifting uncomfortably. Finally, she said, "It would be better for everyone if you did not attend." The words hung between us, cruel in their simplicity. Better for whom? I walked to my room with my heartbeat roaring in my ears. To be barred from my own sister's wedding felt like being erased from my own bloodline. Under that grief, a quiet determination stirred. I told myself I would not beg for entry where I was not wanted, but I also would not let them trample me again. I would wait. I would watch. For the first time in years, instead of feeling powerless, I felt a seed of power growing in the silence. The next evening, we gathered at the dining table. My mother had set the table with her best china. Chloe sat at the head of the table, her engagement ring sparkling under the chandelier. She described the floral arrangements in detail, the tall white roses, the imported orchids. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to ask why my name had been missing from the invitation. For a moment, the clinking of silverware stopped. Chloe turned her head slowly. Her lips curved into a smile that carried no warmth. She said, "The wedding is not meant for people who only drag others down." The words struck hard. My mother shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. My father sliced his chicken as though the conversation did not involve him. I wanted to scream that all I had ever done was try to exist beside them, but the words lodged in my throat. I sat in silence, listening to their voices echo around me. I understood that my place in this family had never been secure. But I also knew I had been given a gift hidden in cruelty. Distance meant freedom to act. Silence meant space to plan. A few mornings later, I sat at my kitchen table, checking my credit report. It was a habit I picked up to give myself a small sense of control. The report opened on my screen. Then a line appeared that made me blink twice. A personal loan. $6,500, opened just 6 months ago. The lender was a downtown bank I had never dealt with. My name was listed, my address was correct, my social security number was the same as mine. My fingers grew clammy as I dialed the customer service number. The representative confirmed the details, including the loan application. She said they had a photocopy of my driver's license and a signed agreement on file. I asked her to send me copies. When the email came, I opened the files with dread. There it was. A grainy photocopy of my license. The signature looked similar to mine, but like someone had practiced it. The contact number, however, was not mine. I fetched an old shoebox from my closet filled with years of scraps and notes. At the bottom was a torn envelope with Chloe's handwriting from years ago, scribbling her new cell number. The numbers matched. If Chloe had done this, it was not just a prank. It was fraud. A deliberate act using my name. It was a crime that could ruin me. I closed my laptop, my pulse thudding in my ears. I told myself not to panic, but a thought pressed harder. If Chloe was willing to risk this much, what else was she hiding? The next morning, I called Sarah, an old friend from college who now worked in compliance at a regional bank. I told her about the strange $6,500 loan, the forged signature, and the phone number that pointed to Chloe. She promised she would check what she could unofficially. That evening, Sarah called back. Her voice was low. She told me she had searched the internal databases, and what she found went far beyond a single small loan. My name appeared on a much larger credit file, tied to a commercial loan application for $420,000. The air drained from my lungs. I sat heavily on the couch. Sarah explained that the loan had been approved nearly a year ago with collateral listed under my name. The documents on file had the same photocopied license and the same forged signature. She also mentioned the email address tied to the application. It was an old email Chloe once used when she applied for an internship years ago, a slight misspelling she claimed nobody else would notice. After we hung up, my hands trembled. This was calculated. A crime designed to bury me under massive debt while shielding the real culprits. Slowly, the pieces aligned. Chloe had excluded me from her wedding not just to humiliate me. She needed me far away, silent, absent while she and Julian Vance tied themselves to the Vance family empire. The fewer eyes on her, the safer her secret remained. Inviting me risked someone discovering the massive loans she had built in my name. I was not just unwanted. I was a liability to be erased. I gathered the documents into a folder, the faint outline of a plan forming in my mind. The next few days, I noticed a black SUV parked across from my house at odd hours. The chill in my stomach told me it was no mistake. Then, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The message read, "Do not get involved or regret." Whoever sent it knew I was digging. That afternoon, driving home from the high school along a two-lane road that cut through the marsh, I pressed the brake as I approached a stop sign. Nothing happened. The pedal sank to the floor with no resistance. My heart leapt into my throat. The car surged forward, and I yanked the wheel to the right, swerving onto the shoulder. Gravel sprayed as the car skidded to a halt, inches from a ditch. When I finally stepped out, my legs shook so badly I had to lean against the hood. I called a tow truck and rode in silence to the nearest garage. The mechanic, a gray-haired man with oil-stained hands, slid under the car. Minutes later, he wheeled out, wiping his palms on a rag. He looked at me strangely. "The brake line has been cut," he said at last. "Not worn out. Cut clean, like with a blade." The words hit me like a physical blow. Someone had tried to kill me. If I stayed quiet, if I did nothing, they would erase me permanently. Either I would die in a ditch, or live the rest of my life buried under debts that were never mine. I went home, pulled out the folder, and wrote in my notebook, "Document everything, keep copies outside the house, trust no one." I began scanning each page into my computer. They had shown me what they were capable of. Now it was my turn. The next morning, I called Marcus Thorne. We had gone to high school together, and he was now practicing law. I drove to his office and laid the folder in front of him. He read silently for a long time. When he finally looked up, his face was sober. "This is serious, Clara. You could be held liable if they keep pushing these loans in your name. But you also have leverage." He told me to start gathering more conversations and documents, but legally. He handed me a small recorder. "Pretend to be afraid," he said. "Let them think they won. That is when they will slip. 2 days later, Chloe called. Her voice came through sharp and sweet. She asked how I was doing, acting innocent. I answered carefully, sounding worn down. Then her tone shifted, growing colder and heavier. If you breathe a word about those papers, Clara, if you even think about running your mouth, you will spend the rest of your life paying off debts you never imagined. She laughed lightly, covering it as if it were a joke. I held the phone steady and told her I understood. When I ended the call, I reached into my purse. The red light on the recorder blinked steady. Every word had been captured. I backed it up immediately to a secure cloud folder. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt a flicker of control. Charleston had grown too small, and eyes followed me. If Chloe and Julian thought I was plotting, I needed to give them a distraction. I booked tickets to Santorini with a friend. I packed light but deliberate silk dresses and wide-brimmed hats. I let my friend snap photos of me against the whitewashed walls and endless blue sea, and I posted them online. But what they did not see was what I carried in the bottom of my tote. While my friend napped, I walked to a quiet cafe overlooking the caldera. I connected to the secure Wi-Fi and sent the files, bank statements, forged applications, copies of checks, to a secure inbox at a financial crimes office stateside. I pressed send, setting a fire across the ocean while looking like a careless tourist. Back in Charleston, the whispers reached them. Julian was seen furious at a bar, snapping at someone on the phone. Chloe's voice carried through a closed door at their townhouse, shouting about how careless he had been. I received a voicemail from an unknown number. The voice was panicked. Clara, if you think you can ruin us, you are mistaken. I saved the voicemail and sent it to Marcus. The cracks were widening. They were tearing each other apart because the silence left them guessing. While I was away, the newspapers in Charleston were filled with glossy spreads about the upcoming Vance wedding. Socialites wrote with giddy excitement about the imported orchids, the 8-tier cake flown in from New York, and the designer gown Chloe would wear. None of those readers knew that behind the manicured hedges of the Vance estate, an envelope had arrived. Eleanor Vance, Julian's mother, held it in her hand at the breakfast table. She slid it open and drew out the contents. Copies of loan applications. Pages of forged signatures. My name printed again and again. Debts that ran into hundreds of thousands. She sent for Julian. He came into the library, his confidence intact. She slid the papers across the desk. Look at these. Julian glanced down, and his smile faltered. This is nothing but a setup, he said. Eleanor did not blink. The name on these loans is Clara Ashburn. She is your fiancé's sister, is she not? Before he could answer, Chloe swept into the room. She picked up one of the sheets and laughed airily. Oh, this again. Clara must be behind this. She is jealous and bitter because she was not invited. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe Clara fabricated entire loan files with bank seals and notarized signatures? She tapped the papers once more. If there is truth here, I will not allow this marriage to go forward. Julian and Chloe left the library, cracks spreading quietly through their foundation. When I flew back to Charleston, I met Marcus at his office. We packed the evidence into 2 briefcases, every forged document, the photos of signatures, the audio clips of Chloe's threats. We drove to a government building and met with Detective Harris and Detective Monroe. Did you sign any of these loans? Harris asked. No, I answered firmly. Monroe slid a notepad across the table. We have already traced the funds. They were funneled through shell accounts before landing in Julian Vance's holdings. Your sister co-signed at least one transfer using your name. It is not just fraud. It is conspiracy. So when will you act? Marcus asked. Harris's expression did not shift. At the moment they least expect. Until then, silence. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and heavy with humidity. I sat by my window, my apartment quiet while the city stirred with church bells. Across town, Chloe was stepping into lace and silk. Her perfect day. The 8-tier cake was waiting. My parents were seated in the second row at St. Michael's Church, ready to watch their golden daughter marry into wealth. I poured myself coffee and turned on the muted feed of a local journalist's social media page. Inside the church, Chloe would be walking down the aisle, her veil trailing like a river of light. Julian waiting at the altar. I pictured the priest lifting his voice. And then, according to the live updates, the doors opened. Uniformed officers stepped into the aisle, their presence slicing through the candlelight. Murmurs rippled through the pews. The priest faltered as Detective Harris produced a folded document and read aloud. Chloe Ashburn, you are under arrest for multiple counts of bank fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft. The sanctuary erupted into chaos. Chloe's bouquet tumbled to the floor. She reached for Julian, frantic, pleading. But Julian, perfectly polished Julian, stepped back the moment the handcuffs gleamed. His voice cut through the din, sharp and cold. I cannot do this. I will not marry a criminal. He pulled away, retreating behind his father's shoulder, refusing to bind himself to scandal. The officers guided Chloe firmly toward the doors, her veil dragging across the stone aisle. Outside, the flashes of cameras erupted, capturing the image of a bride in cuffs. My phone buzzed with alert after alert. The Vance family sat stiffly, Eleanor glaring as her warnings proved true. My mother fainted. My father stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The Ashburn name, once polished and envied, was dragged through the public square. I closed my eyes and breathed. The silence I had been waiting for was gone, shattered by the noise of justice crashing down. Chloe had tried to bury me under debts and lies. Instead, she had buried herself. In the days that followed, the Vance family released a cold statement severing all ties. Julian's engagement was declared void. Chloe lost her fiancé, her access to the Vance fortune, and the carefully constructed image she prized above all else. Her dream had shattered with one announcement. I did not go to the courtroom for her sentencing. I did not need to. Fraud and forgery carried weight no charm could soften. Chloe received years to serve and heavy fines to pay. My parents were left to face their neighbors and their own choices in absolute shame. And I was left with something rarer than revenge. I had my dignity back. I looked straight ahead, calm and steady, knowing my life was finally mine to shape. Justice sometimes comes late, but it never fails to arrive. If you have ever been pushed aside or silenced, remember this: the truth will speak. Share your thoughts below, and stay with my channel for the stories still to come.